Welcome to this week's podcast, where I have the pleasure of speaking with Hobbs, Margaret, an East Texas rancher. Along with his wife and kids, he runs Fire and Salt, a company that sells bulk grass-fed beef from his regenerative-based ranch. Join me while we talk about everything from entrepreneurship to giant sloths and laser shooting drones. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, Hobbs. Thanks for joining me on the podcast. I usually start with a little bit of a self-introduction, and maybe you can share your story and your farm and your community and how you got started. So yeah.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Well, my name is Hobbs. I was born and raised in the Texas Panhandle, in and around the ranching community there. Then I fled from that as fast as I could when I graduated high school, and went to the University of Oregon, where I studied politics and government and music. And during my 20s, I worked as a musician and a composer. I had some moderate success there. I did the theme music for a bunch of the tennis majors for a while, Australian Open, Wimbledon, and then played rock and roll music all around the state of Oregon primarily. Did a few things here and there during that period, and then in my late 20s, my wife and I got married in 2016. My wife and I had a daughter, and when I had a kid, it became very clear that I needed to engage in an activity that was more directed not only towards the individual skill set that I had, but also in one that could serve civilization in a more meaningful way. And so about the time I had my daughter was when I discovered sort of regenerative agriculture, and discovered quite quickly that I had a knack for it, and a knack for understanding it. It just made complete crystal clear sense to me very quickly. And so we started our own company in Oregon, ran that for 3 years, sold it, and moved down here to Deep East Texas, where I am currently running a ranch here that my family owns and developing a nativized species of cattle. I guess it would be a breed or composite breed of cattle, and making TikTok videos and Instagram, and just generally educating and consulting, and pursuing opportunities as they arise.
So do you come from a ranching family, or did you pick this up along your way? As obviously you took some time, I guess, in your 20s, like you were saying, and you sort of left that aside, but came back into it. So was that something you transitioned into quite easily, or there was a learning curve?
Well, there's definitely a learning curve. I mean, I grew up, my granddad managed big ranches. My great granddad managed big ranches. My great great grandfather came to the Panhandle of Texas in 1888 to run part of the XIT Ranch, which is a very famous ranch, that was at one point one of the largest ranches in the country. And so we definitely have a heritage, but that big country ranching is far more geared towards a culture that is based on the horse, and regenerative agriculture is far more focused on the soil and the mechanisms for ecosystem support. Basically the ecosystem is a giant machine, and you have to make sure all of the parts are functioning. Whereas traditional ranching has typically been a bit of a martial art. It's a combination of martial arts and hunter-gatherer behavior, where you turn the cattle out, spend all your time making sure your horses work well, and then several times a year you gather the cattle up, work them, process them, sell them, ship them, brand them. So it's much less based on an ecological outlook and far more based on a sort of a socio-cultural personal mythology of the horse.
Hmm. And I guess that's the traditional American way of cattle ranching, right? Sort of like,
Right.
I guess, for the origin of the cowboy and such, right?
Right, that's exactly right. It's about the sort of the transcendental mythic relationship between a man and a horse, or a woman and a horse. And once I began to really get into regenerative agriculture, it gave birth to it allowed the the integration of my inner environmentalist into my inner rancher. So it solved the core differences between those two uh, philosophies.
Yeah, I don't know if have you ever heard of this other rancher, uh, well, I suppose rancher and farmer, called Will Harris. He
Yep.
has white oak pastures out in Georgia,
Hmm.
and he sort of had this revelation in the '90s, right, and changed up his way of farming and doing and running his ranch. So I guess it was who were your sort of influential characters in your development?
Sure, he's an Alan Savory devotee, and so Alan Savory definitely is the godfather to some degree of what he calls holistic management.
Mhm.
I find myself more drawn to the teachings of a guy named Johann Zietsman, and
Mhm.
he is a Zimbabwean who developed ultra high density grazing on low quality forage in northern Zimbabwe. And he wrote a book called Man, Cattle, and Veld, and it basically just uh, went around kicking the shins of conventional ranching, and he basically figured out how to do everything backwards. He and Alan Savory share many similarities, but I think that Johann, being a lifelong cattleman who was able to crack the code of ecologically based and historical and ecological based ruminant integration into land management, has been able to come up with a more complete understanding of what it takes. You know, Alan Savory has done a great job popularizing the necessity of quadrupeds, ungulate ruminant quadrupeds on the landscape. Um, you know, so but for me, Johann Zietsman is the guy that I follow. Well, I mean, it's one of those like, you know, I've read his book so many times, I kind of have it at heart, and I'm on his WhatsApp group, and I've talked to him several times, and it's one of those things where, you know, you eventually have to just kind of branch off and start doing your own thing. But you know, there's an infinite amount of stuff you can learn from guys like that.
Yeah, I know of Alan Savory. I learned about him in his TED Talk that he had a few years ago, where he was,
Sure.
sharing his research and how that could help desertification in Africa. I guess I don't know Johann Zietsman, but I guess they're both in based somewhere in Africa. I'm not sure what country, but yeah, I guess that was the reason I point that out is because his Johann, or excuse me, Alan Savory's position is that he came to the US and noticed that a lot of these grasslands in the western US and I guess public land that used to be that used to have cattle on it don't anymore. So I was surprised when you said that that old way of sort of the cowboy culture way of raising cattle is not or I guess it didn't work for you, right? So I was just curious
Oh,
that.
I mean, it was more of probably a cultural difference, and
Mhm.
you know what Alan Savory found is that landscapes that were devoid of cattle altogether degraded faster than landscapes that had cattle on them. Now, they were still degrading; they were just degrading more slowly. However, once you make that shift to bunching the cattle up tightly and moving them frequently and putting them in their ancestrally and ecologically necessary herd form, then the landscapes start to improve. So, yeah, having cattle on the landscape is better than not having cattle, but still they were used improperly. You know, people were doing the best that they could. Um, and using the technology that they had, certainly the original technology for cattle management or ruminant management is a sharp-toothed predator. You know, but now those largely went extinct about 13,000 years ago. And then the best technology they had were a very expensive barbed wire fence. Well, before that, they didn't have that at all. They had, you know, effectively horses and to some degree dogs, and then they had barbed wire fence. And it's only in the last 30, 40 years that electric fence has allowed us to replicate that original predator pressure that puts animals in a herd form that gives the ecology its sort of genetic expectations.
Yeah, I hear you talk a lot about, I guess, ultra high density grazing, right? Um, so is that what you're referring to? Sort of getting that group action where all the cattle's in one area together, as opposed to widespread?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, that's exactly right. It's an entire program. People often, I've made probably 15, 1,700, maybe 2,000 videos on TikTok, and most of the time people will take one 60-second video and go, "Oh, you can't just take all the forage all the time." And so I need to say up front that it's a part of an entire program. That severe grazing coupled with long rest periods is definitely the way to go when you are trying to improve a landscape, regardless of where you are. If you're in the high desert environment or if you're in a low subtropical environment, that's the landscape need that animal pressure in order to thrive, in order to live. It's not negotiable. It's mandatory. Ruminants and grass have been on the planet about the same amount of time. They need each other. They have to have each other. If suddenly all the ruminants disappeared, what you would have is the dry areas would turn to desert and the wet areas would turn to overgrown forest, which would then burn.
Hmm.
It's those ruminant animals that keep things kind of functioning. And the problem with the environment from the human standpoint is that it degrades so slowly that one human lifetime is not really enough to see what's happening. You need multiple human lifetimes to see that the landscape is degrading. And on a geological scale, it's degrading very quickly. For instance, when ranchers first came to the American West Texas, say the Big Bend area, the grass was so tall they would have to change horses at midday because they were so tired from walking through it. Now it's desert, So in one human lifetime, you might not be able to see that so clearly. However, over several lifetimes, it really starts to add up. And so the ecology as we know it, we're beginning to understand that the ecology was much more regulated and at a great height, largely pre 13,000 years before the present day. Just the days of the bison were not good enough. It was already a degraded landscape when it was just bison, because bison are ruminant. The landscape was kept in really good shape by not only ruminants, which have four stomachs, but also hindgut fermenters. Like a horse is a hindgut fermenter, an elephant is a hindgut fermenter. They can digest far lower quality in forages. And all that to say that in the Pleistocene, you had mammoths, mastodon, you had giant sloths, you had all kinds of bison, you had all kinds of antelope, and they were all in herd form moving across the landscape, keeping it maintained and well functioning. Then the Younger Dryas hit, the Younger Dryas period. You may be familiar with that, about 12,800 years ago. And for about 1,800 years, the temperatures dropped by about 20 degrees. It was either 10 or 20 degrees Celsius, and it killed off basically everything. Killed off most of humanity, killed off something like 80% of the large animals. And so basically when humanity recovered and the temperatures recovered, what did we have to do? We had to create agriculture because the ecology was no longer providing us with that wonderful smorgasbord of nutrition that we had, previous to the Younger Dryas period. So agriculture, as I see it, is a response to a degraded ecology. So when people say that the bison created all of this wonderful topsoil, it's not true. It's way before that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the Younger Dryas has been popularized. I forget this British news. Not well, he was a newscaster, then became journalist, and
Graham Hancock.
there you go. Yeah, it's been popularized recently, right? So, do you think that that I guess agriculture as we know of it today is, you think it's a direct cause of that situation? The younger
Yeah, yeah.
dryas
I mean,
farm?
he and Randall Carlson do
Right.
some really great work on that. If you've listened to their podcasts,
I have.
um, to me that all dovetails so beautifully with my understanding of what's happening on the ground at the soil level. That I mean, if you look at, I've given presentations about the comet impacts at the beginning of the younger Dryas,
Mhm.
and if you trace the microsphere spherules and the nanodiamond locations, you basically find that all of the areas that don't have those still have the mega herbivores. They still have elephants. They still have their large animals. But the areas that were basically lit on fire, a third of the animal or the planet's surface was lit on fire during these impacts. All of the herbivores are gone. And what happened? The bison that were left, they really reduced in size. Those bison previous to that were huge, and then they reduced in size. And my theory on that is because you had much degraded forage quality, and the degraded forage quality, smaller framed animals always have an advantage on lower quality forage. So I think basically before the younger Dryas period on the non-glaciated areas, it was a Jurassic Park of a type that we could not even begin to comprehend right now.
Hmm. And I'm curious, you mentioned fire, right? So now that we have so many wildfires, is that somehow tied in, do you think?
Yeah, it's because we don't have those massive animals, herds of animals thinning out the forest. Every mastodon find that they've ever found, or site they've ever found, any mastodon site that had um, evidence of what it had been eating showed that it had coniferous twigs in its digestive system, which means that it was walking around eating trees, and which means that it was walking around eating baby trees, probably because those are the tenderest, best ones. And mastodon um, are, believe they're, can't remember, the mammoth and mastodon. One's a ruminant, one is a hindgut fermenter, but the mastodon was effectively the goat of uh, the Pleistocene, and the mammoth was effectively the cow. So in essence, those animals, those huge animals, were walking through the forests, keeping them open, keeping them clear. And so when you don't have all of this fuel, all of the fine fuels, the grasses, they were kept down by this huge panoply of herd animals, and the latter fuels, these small and medium-sized trees, were eaten by giant sloths that were up to 12, 14 feet high. If you have a tree that's completely cleared 12 to 14 feet high, all of the limbs are eaten off by giant sloths, then the fire can't get up into the canopy, even if there is fire. And also, the soil is so healthy that it holds water, and generally, you only get lightning strikes during the rainy season, and during the rainy season, everything's green, so it doesn't burn. So there's not a lot of evidence to indicate that wildfires were near as widespread during the Pleistocene. And then the younger Dryas hit; these animals went, basically extinct in huge numbers. And then humanity discovered that in order to mimic that process of keeping the landscapes open and keeping the forests kind of open, they had to start lighting fires. And so that started the tradition of indigenous people lighting fires. And so now people think that that's one of the great tools to keep landscapes healthy. But fire, prescribed burns, and agriculture are two of the reactions to a degraded ecology as a result of the younger Dryas impacts.
And I don't know if you've seen the research from Paul Hessburg, I believe is his name, where he suggests, I mean, just 100 years ago in the Pacific Northwest, I guess in all of the West Coast, there were forests were much less dense, but and right, they didn't have these large ruminant animals, and so you know, a lot of the cause, according to him, is just fire safety and all these initiatives that have been set up to reduce wildfires so that like it's our we are causing the issue. And there was he suggests that there were used to be areas of that were at lower elevations that were separate forests from higher elevations, and there was, let's say, a gully in between that would separate the fire. So I guess the question is, w- other than fire management, what could we do to replicate the process, right?
That's
That
a
you're
great
suggesting.
question. I think that the only solution that we really have is, to some degree, we're doing it, but we're not doing it very effectively. I mean, grazing is the original mechanism. Uh, there's a there's a
But we
there's
don't
a
have mammoths anymore, right? So like,
correct, yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, my dream before I die is to graze mammoths with drones and lasers. If if the Russians can, or somebody can re-engineer a mastodon or mammoth embryo, and we can get an elephant to give birth to it, then there's no way that there. And with drone technology, there's no reason why we can't utilize that instead of electric fence and manage our forest that way. Because in 20 years, I'll get back to your original question in a second. But in 20 years, all management decisions are going to be made by artificial intelligence anyway.
Mhm.
Human beings are going to play a much less significant role in management decision making. So artificial intelligence is going to help us do that quite a lot. But as far as our the techniques that we have, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to develop technologies that allow us to automate fenceless technologies that allow us to graze these uh, areas, particularly in the post-burn environment, so they can keep them down with goats or sheep or cattle, uh, just to replicate that. And the go ahead.
Grazing post burn.
Yeah, I mean they're gonna burn anyway. The areas that are already overgrown, they're gonna burn. That's a foregone conclusion at this point. Um, and once the burn happens, that's when it's really important to get animals in there to properly start the ecosystem. Before the before the Younger Dryas period, the Willamette Valley in Oregon in the Pacific Northwest was open woodland. It wasn't forest at all. And it was only when the Younger Dryas hit and those herd animals disappeared, and then that after the Younger Dryas, there was no more mastodon, no more mammoth evidence in the Willamette Valley, and suddenly it closed into forest. So yeah, like 100 years ago, it was a much more open forest because fires were more prevalent, but still, that's an environment that is degraded from the natural, the natural orientation with a proper load of herd animals. We live in a grazing ecology, and we don't know this. We live in an ecology that is dominated by grazing, and it's everywhere you look when you start looking at it. You go see a football game. What are you looking at? You're looking at a freshly grazed field. You don't play football in tall grass, do you? No. You play it in short grass. All of human recreation is done on a freshly grazed field. Every lawnmower you see, you should see that's a herd animal. Every park you go to, what is it? It's a savanna. It's an open woodland. It's a freshly grazed open woodland. Every rich person's estate, it is designed. Everywhere human beings curate and cultivate an environment to maximize human enjoyment and happiness, it's a savanna. It's an open woodland. Golf courses. Everywhere you look, you'll start seeing it. You'll start to notice, my gosh, we are recreating savannas everywhere we can. It is the proper environment for human frolicking, and that's completely as a result of herd animals.
And so you mentioned earlier that even in more tropical areas, you think this is the solution. Am I correct? Because I mean, my grandfather was a rancher, and the landscape in Central America, where my family's from, is much different than here in the plains. So
Where are you located?
Texas, yeah, I'm in Austin, Texas.
Oh, you're in Austin. Great, great,
Yeah.
great, great. Yeah. Yeah. Well, over here in Lufkin is a lot more similar to Central America probably than it is in Austin. Austin is, you're getting into that Mediterranean type thing, especially as you get over into the Fredericksburg area. We were just over there for a conference recently, and yeah, it is. but it requires a different strategy. So, I mean, when you're in an environment like that, the forage has had to evolve to not rot because it's so wet, and so warm all the time. So you have this forage that's far lower in quality. And so you end up with basically water wrapped in wood with just a sprinkling of nutrients in there. And you end up with, you have to have animals that are completely different genetically than what we're used to seeing. Like if you try to take a European cow over there, like a Charolais or a Limousin or an Angus, you will get what's called tropical degeneration. So you have to use typically African cattle to be able to do well there. And part of the strategy that you have to use is you have to keep that forage in a low vegetative stage. And that's, that's kind of getting into the weeds of management, but there are strategies, and absolutely the only way you can keep cattle in really good condition, or a more effective way to keep cattle in really good condition, is to have properly adapted nutritional and environmental genetics, typically with African-based cattle, and high density grazing on at animal with forage in a proper vegetative state.
And you're talking about Central America at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So 30% of the planet is tropical monsoon, tropical savanna, or humid subtropical. That's 30% of the planet, and those can absorb. Those actually, they require constant herd impact, because if they don't, what happens? It becomes overgrown immediately. So those areas actually require constant herd effect, and if you don't have it, I mean, coupled with a couple other strategic aspects as well. It's not just constantly hammer everything, but the environments like the plains, or once you get into desert areas, it needs herd effect. It needs that high animal impact, but it only needs it, maybe once a year, once every couple of years, and it can maintain its health. And also partly because the forage is so much higher quality in those areas.
But what about something like the Amazon, right? Like, is there still foragers in that area?
Yeah, they're much smaller. The quality of the forage in the Amazon is of the lowest possible quality. The soil is really bad. That's why, the indigenous folks had to invent terra preta to artificially stimulate the soil. And what's happening there is, they're deforesting currently, so it requires us to come up with strategies that mimic nature there. And one of the most important strategies that nature utilizes there are these deep-rooted trees that grab onto all of the nutrients that leach through the soil, because there's so much rainfall that the rainfall hits the soil, leaches down, and takes all the nutrition with it. So any grasses that can grow, there's no nutrition. So that's why you have to make sure that you leave a lot of trees so that it can grab those nutrients, bring it back up into the canopy, and drop it back on the surface. So, and obviously you need patches, not more than patches. You need huge landscapes that are still untouched forest, for sure. But the most productive landscape ecologically for the vast majority of the planet should be a savanna or wooded grassland ecology. That's what, during the Pleistocene, there's ample evidence to indicate that a much larger portion of the planet was savanna than is today.
Could that potentially be something that aided in our evolution as well?
Absolutely, and that's what. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. It aided. I think it aided more in our. And this is venturing out of my areas of expertise. I think it aided a lot in our cultural evolution, and because the human brain during the Pleistocene, which was characterized by huge herds of animals and a lot of savanna type ecology, the human brain doubled in size, and we didn't invent agriculture. We didn't even. I mean, we made improvements on our stone tools through that period, but we didn't really have some sort of quantum leap in technology like we did after the Younger Dryas. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of environment would allow or would facilitate a doubling of the human brain. Basically, the entire creation of the more high level abstract uh, capable,
Frontal lobe.
yeah, neurology.
Mhm. Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. So, sort of changing pace a little bit, I was curious with your TikTok and Instagram, what what was the original purpose behind it, right? Or what's your goal, and how did you what started the path?
I didn't have a goal. My wife suggested that I should get on it. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic, in March of 2020, and uh, I've always had an ability to be on stage, an ability to articulate my thoughts, and she primarily suggested that it would be a good outlet for my efforts, and I did, and it took off quite quickly. So it's been wonderful. I initially had really no motive. I didn't have the intention to get a ton of followers, or I didn't have the intention to build my business or anything like that. But it has been probably the single most important mechanism for uh, pushing me and my notoriety forward in the regenerative or high density grazing world.
How long have you been doing this then?
So a little over 3 years now.
Okay, but I meant how long have you been, I guess, quote unquote,
Uh, 5 years. 5 years I've been doing high density grazing for 5 years.
and before that, it was more traditional.
Before that, I was a musician and composer for most of my
Oh,
20s, and then basically until I was, I grew up on a small ranch and then spent time on ranches growing up, and then during college, I would go to school during the school year, and then in the summer, I would work on a ranch in the Panhandle, riding colts and doing general ranch work there, and playing music at night, which that was a great time in my life for sure.
I mean, I asked just because you seem to have a breadth of knowledge, and I would consider that it would take a while to gather up all this knowledge. So.
Well, I've as I said, I have a knack for it, and it's for whatever reason, it just makes sense to me, and it's one of those things where I have sort of it's not that I have a huge depth of knowledge in the specifics of soil chemistry or anything like that. It's that I have a huge breadth of knowledge in various areas, and I'm able to synthesize those together and give unique insights. You know, and that's really my gift and my advantage. So, I mean, everything that I see, I filter through all of the other wide varieties of knowledge bases that I have, and so it gives me a unique perspective that isn't really represented out there. I mean, there are people who can talk about soil health all day long. Like, I don't give a shit about soil health, really, quite frankly. My perspective is, if you fix, and this is a Johann Zietsman perspective, if you fix what's happening on top of the soil with herd effect, it fixes what's happening below the soil. We don't have to get super excited about, and this is my perspective once again, about the vicissitudes and the esoteric abstractions of every little soil chemistry or biology thing. I mean, to me, that's still more reductivism. And while that's important, we have to remember that there's this whole vista of human endeavor and knowledge that needs to be filtered into what we're talking about. So for me, regenerative agriculture, which is a phrase I don't like to use because it doesn't say anything. So this let's say ecologically based agriculture is more of a humanities study in humanities than it is a study in science or agriculture for me.
Hmm. Do you mind expanding on that? What do you mean? Why
Sure.
humanities?
Because we live in a grazing ecology. That's one of the things that I like to say, and I believe it's true. Our entire culture is based on savanna ecology. As I said, if you go to a soccer match, you're watching. I mean, imagine this. It would be a great commercial, right? If you had if you had a bunch of cavemen walk out with a ball and then they walk out into this grassy area, but the grass is like 6 feet tall, like they can't play their game, right? You know,
Right, right.
like they're like or whatever to each other, and then suddenly this big herd comes along, and they're like smile to each other knowingly, and then the herd wipes out all this grass and this just like freshly grazed area, and then they can like play their primitive ball game or whatever. You know,
I
that
see.
would be that would be a badass like commercial for like the South African rugby team or something. But that's I mean, and so that's sort of a basic idea of why it's a humanities. But regenerative agriculture or ecologically based agriculture has the capacity to completely reorient our relationship with the natural world, because we have forgotten that we're animals over the last basically 200 years. We've forgotten that we are another piece of conscious existence expressing itself in this sort of biological form, you know. And go ahead, you have a question, I can see.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that you see a lot of people moving, or there's a big resurgence of homesteading at the moment,
Mhm.
online and such, and so I definitely see more people wanting to get on the land and more people realizing, hey, like living in a cubicle isn't our natural state of being, and they want to get back to the land. And also just like, let's say, homeschooling your children and, letting your kids play on the land and rather than being stuck at a desk, 8 hours a day. And that's a whole other conversation, I suppose. But there's definitely a movement I see, and more people are getting interested in where their food's coming in from and maybe developing their own source of food. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think it is exactly this conversation, because uh, people are beginning to realize that the world that they were born into is the experiment. Like this living in concert with the land, that is as old as time. That's as old as humanity, and that it calls to us on a deep, deep level. That's why when you go out and you stand in a lawn that's been freshly mowed, it feels good because it recreates that savanna environment of a freshly mowed, freshly grazed, uh, and safe environment. I mean, your biggest threats in a savanna environment were a lion hiding behind a big clump of grass, or a snake in the grass, or a snake above you in a tree, and then suddenly this big herd comes through and knocks all the grass down, and you can see everywhere, and your nervous system is able to downregulate, and you feel relaxed, and that's why we create savanna environments. That's why old dudes go to the golf course. It's because they are able to recreate in an environment that allows the down regulation of our nervous system, and it's like it feels so good. Like that's why, because they know there's not a lion that is going to eat them, and if there is, they have a chance to get up a tree before it gets to them. Because you can see it from so far away. It's all this is all a recreation of the environment that we evolved in. And so that's what, to me, that's why it's a humanities. As we were discussing, it's certainly a humanities because the trajectory of human uh, existence is going to be largely defined by uh, a a food production and a recreation that is in line with natural principles. And you throw in the fact that we are trying to figure out how to not toast our planet right now. And that those exact eco agricultural principles, the principles upon which the ecology manages, maintains, and improves itself, are the very principles that allow us to be fed and have a meaningful and purposeful life and a satisfied existence. If you have a savanna environment that allows the human brain to double in size and produces a lot of food, then you got to imagine that the human condition was pretty good for a lot of that period. If there's this basically this space race inside the skull happening, you got to imagine that the conditions were pretty good for that to occur. And so that's what we're talking about here. Is we're talking about the trajectory. Do we want to live in a continue like a techno dystopia, where everybody barely finds a way to feed ourselves? Because that only goes one direction. That only goes down. We got to figure out how to re-terraform the planet we're on before we can go to other planets and terraform those planets.
That's one thing that I've heard, like Will Harris mentioned that all these like Bill Gates buying land, they're all technocrats, right? And they're all purchasing land and going into farming and ranching from a technology standpoint, which is what sort of got us in this problem in the first place. And I'm an engineer. I'm the first person to love technology, but there's a time and a place, I suppose, right?
Right. It's who's running the show here, right? I mean, why do you think we eat so much wheat? Well, it's because, wheat and small grains, it's because those are the foods that are conducive to technology. And the foods that humans actually are supposed to eat are the ones that are least compatible with technology: roots, fruits, nuts, meat, and honey. Those are the most expensive things that you're going to find at the grocery store because they're the least compatible with technology. And we have to make sure that technology is our tool rather than us being technology's tool. I mean, if you were an alien and some alien consciousness and you hovered down over Los Angeles, and who would you think is in charge? Obviously the cars. You would think the cars are in charge. They get these little humans to come in and drive them around, and then the humans go inside these buildings, which, the technology is obviously in charge, and the technology is directing our lives. And that's what people are beginning to feel at a either conscious or subconscious level. And it is driving them away from these areas that are completely dominated by technology and centralized power structures. And when I say centralized power structures, I mean like the police, the firefighter, the whole idea that if something happens, somebody else who is specialized in that environment is going to save you. If the pipe bursts, a plumber is going to come. Out on the ranch, if a pipe bursts, I'm the plumber.
Mm-hmm.
I have to know how to do a lot of different things, and it makes you a much more well-rounded and capable human being and puts you much more in tune with the human condition and the human experience. And that's what people are longing for.
But to a degree, also to play devil's advocate, like you use social media to spread your message, right? So technology can also be a benefit to you. I mean, and you see ranchers across the US or I guess the world, and they're starting to sell direct to consumer like you. And that's good for me. I mean, I know every dollar when I purchase meat at the supermarket, that's voting for big agriculture rather than purchasing from somebody like you or Will Harris or, all these people. So it can be a benefit, right?
Yeah, but that's technology that is used consciously by me, not me being used by technology. To some degree, you have to get into there's probably some minutia to be discussed there about to what degree we are using technology versus it's using us. But it's not mutually exclusive. It's not like technology is all good or all bad. And I'm a big fan of technology as well. I'm working with a company in Australia right now on to how we can more effectively use technology in high density grazing. And I think it's really important. And as I said, in 20 years, artificial intelligence is going to be able to make better management decisions than we are. So I'm a big fan of technology, but I don't want to be a slave to technology in a direct or an indirect way. And right now, I think the vast majority of humanity the vast majority of Americans in particular, especially if you live in an urban environment, are more a slave to technology than they're aware of. And we're guided constantly by what we see on television or on our phones. We are shuttled around in these predetermined pathways through these streets and elevators and escalators and hallways that have been designed and predestined for us. Have you heard of the genre called solar punk?
Solar punk? No, music genre? No.
No, actually, but hey, maybe maybe that could be a cool thing. But yeah, so it's kind of the happy, human human-led, human happiness, purpose, and meaning led version uh, of what's the other one? Technopunk or digital punk or you have to help me here. Uh,
I can't. I guess I'm
it,
not sure what you're
so it's
referring.
so it's like if you imagine a futuristic dystopic world that's dominated by um, computers. God, what's it called? No, I'm looking it up now.
No worries.
Cyberpunk.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So cyberpunk is kind of the computers run everything, and you have computers on your head and in your head. Solarpunk is like where we live in this Garden of Eden, but we have like solar panels, and we have power still, and it's more of a solar driven versus like either a fossil fuel or a nuclear driven kind of environment, and so that's kind of how I see the pathway that we get to choose going forward for how we want human civilization to be. I'm far more interested in getting more of our power from the sun, if possible. And I say that not only from turning on the lights in our house, but also from feeding our animals. I mean, that's ultimately what ecologically based agriculture, regenerative agriculture is about. It's about harnessing sunlight in a more effective manner.
Hmm. I mean, but one thing you hear a lot about solar is, it takes over the ecosystem, right? A lot of species die. A lot of, I mean, I guess I know that you're talking about the idea, but maybe I'm going a little bit of a sidetrack.
Sure.
But but yeah, I mean, like windmills and solar panels, they can be destructive, right, to the
Sure,
environment.
windmills are not a great long-term solution as
Mm.
far as I can tell. Uh, I think solar panels, big solar farms definitely have the capacity to be destructive. They are incorporating grazers into solar farms now. They're raising them like 9 feet off the ground so that grazers can get
Mm.
underneath them. But I think in a more solar punk type environment that we're destroying, it's going to be much more decentralized. Everybody has their own,
The off
solar.
grid.
Yeah, exactly. It's much more off-grid type future that I'm sort of thinking about and looking at. And who's really good at thinking about this is the Australians. They're way ahead of us
In the
in
sun, so.
yeah, in this world, there's a gentleman that I've been working with, runs a company called AgriProve. His name is Matthew Warnken, and he has really opened my eyes uh to what could be possible, moving forward in the next 50, 100 years. And he's really inspired me. In the beginning, much of my ranching was very almost like collapse ranching, like when we have a much uh, a large decrease in the amount of resources available to us, and through my work with him, I have a much more optimistic view of the future, and it's much more fun to view the future optimistically than uh, pessimistically.
Right. Yeah, I'm a number one fan of being an optimist, even in moments where it's difficult. So, so I guess my next question would be is, I know before we jumped on the podcast, or before we went live, rather, we were talking about your vision of starting a farm in Uruguay, and so I was curious, does that somehow tie in to what you're talking about? Is that like your vision to create sort of a solar punk environment down in Uruguay for you and your family?
Well, I'd like to own ranches all over the world. Uruguay I think, is a great option. I think it's the most stable country economically in South America. I hear great things about Paraguay as well, although they're probably uh, 10, 20 years behind Paraguay in terms of stability. But yeah, I think that certainly I do want to create the next version of a regenerative ranch, or a carbon capture ranch, or a eco-agricultural um, Pleistocene pasture type environment is going to be unrecognizable to what we see today. We're going to figure out how to not need fences. We're going to figure that out. Um, we are going to figure out how to most effectively graze these environments so that we can create the most number of life forms per cubic meter. And artificial intelligence is going to help us identify those regularities so that we can apply them. Um, but yeah, I think that ultimately it's going to look like, in 50 years, your mowers, your seeders, all of this stuff is going to be, uh, it's going to have its own autonomy. It's all going to run without humans. It's going to be connected to a central brain on your farm that's powered by some source on your farm, and you're going to be able to have a pixel level understanding of your entire environment. You'll be able to know what each individual square meter needs or is, or how it's how many plants are there, how many life forms are there, what's the plant density, what are the species, what is the stage of succession, what is the moisture content, what is, how much, you'll be able to tell from a drone, what is the soil organic carbon percentage, is it going up, is it going down, how did it respond to the most recent grazing, all of that stuff is going to be largely automatic. So what a grazier is going to go from basically a shepherd to more a music director. It's going to go from basically like playing the guitar to being a DJ. Is kind of what's going to happen in the more Western environments. So I would love to, and then to some degree, right now we're seeing a huge surge of people into the local beef industry, right? And that's the lowest level for me of what I want to build. So beef is the bottom level. The next level is consulting. And so I consult for individuals, I consult for corporations, and largely vision is I think, and getting people excited is the most important part about that consulting mechanism. And then once you build enough a knowledge base and connections, then you begin to invest in equity, investing in land and getting that land, that fund built to acquire land, benefit from what's happening on the land, implement your vision on it in a way that is magnifiable, and benefit from all of the various financial aspects of land appreciation. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you want to set it up to where you have equity in these lands, but obviously you don't necessarily run them, because I'm sure if you want ranches all over the world, then you won't be able to do it all yourself. Um, but I guess that's the end goal, right? To have sort of just your hand a little bit in every area of the world.
Right, I'd like to phase myself out from, right, I want to phase myself out from everything except sort of high-level vision stuff. And the more I can do that, the more I think I think that's really actually my gift is the high-level vision stuff. And, most people might think I'm crazy, and, being on TikTok and Instagram for long enough, you get insulted to the level that you don't even care about it anymore. And all the way up to and including death threats occasionally. So I have no problem being a little bit crazy, and there are other people out there who have that vision as well, who in complementary areas, and working together, we're going to be able to create some really cool stuff. And I want to open up the space for a lot of people, all these people who are moving back to the land, the people who are tired of being in the cubicles, who want to be on the land, to go and perform these activities that I am performing. And when I got started in this type of agriculture, there were no jobs for it. So I had to start my own company. That's why I started my own company, is because there were no jobs for it. I probably would have just gone to work for somebody else if there were jobs for it. That you would find the occasional, like, we're regenerative, but there was nobody doing ultra high density, non-selective grazing in the style of Johann Zietsman when I got started. And so there's still almost nobody doing that. There are quite a few in Southern Africa. There are quite a few in South America, some in Mexico, a few in Australia, but in the United States, there are just a handful. And everybody who's doing it, very few people are doing it all the way. So, I mean, there's still a lot of growth to do. And so I want to expand that style of grazing. So where we're re-implementing the natural cycles that were present before the onset of the Younger Dryas on as much landscape as possible. And that's largely what Alan Savory has done with the Alan Savory Institute. And he's done a good job of uh, meeting people where they're at. The downside of that, in my opinion, is that it kind of gets watered down. I'm a lot more punk rock, where I'm like, this is what we're doing. This is what it takes to get there. Let's go full speed all the way there. I'm not interested in meeting you where you're at. And that's kind of why I have to own the ranches, because if other people own it, then you have to commune with them and work in their understanding. And a lot of people, they're attached to their cows, they're attached to their way of doing things, they're attached to their horses. So you have to overcome people's personal mythology. And so I'm just far more interested in going all the way. And that's actually how I knew when I got started with almost no money, no cattle, and no land, that the only chance that I had of making this work was, number one, going as hard as I possibly could. Number two, doing that in very conspicuous areas. So what I ended up doing was creating a performance art first and foremost. Like, it would be dumb for me to I'm going to buy 200 cows and enough land to run them and then be in debt for the rest of my life and probably lose all that because the finances just don't work. So what I did was I started very small, and through social media as a performance art, allowed myself to grow from there. And that's I think the thing that people miss with regard to social media is that it's a performance art. And there are other aspects to it as well, but that's what allowed me to succeed, was taking this small bit of resources that I had and magnifying it as much as possible as a performance art over the last 3 years with TikTok and Instagram. TikTok was the big one. For about a year and a half, I didn't even do any Instagram. And then I jumped over to just cross-posting my TikTok stuff to Instagram. And then I went viral on Instagram for a video about JP Morgan and jumped up to 43,000 followers over there. So now I have a lot of pull on both platforms at this point. So performance art and magnifying your efforts through social media is indispensable.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, like, the days of social media actually being social, they are long gone, right? It's just a tool for your business, for your message, for whatever it is, for your art, as you say. So I definitely am a fan. Like, I've never been a person to post about a ton about my life, right? Like, I live it, and I don't care what other people think. So, but obviously now with the podcast, it's much different, right? It's a tool. It's part of the business. It's something to put myself out there. So it's different. But something else I wanted to mention is the fact that I guess you sort of found your particular skill, like the thing that you know that makes you special, or that you want to bring to the world, and you're sort of going from a large set of skills down to, or I guess you want to get to the point where you're doing consulting, where you're doing something very, very specific. And I feel like that's something that I've noticed from executives and different business people, right? Like entrepreneurs in general, like, let's say, I don't know, Jeff Bezos, right? Like, he just needs I've heard him say where he just needs to make one good decision per day, and he's the CEO of Amazon, right? So I guess, is that something you were conscious of, or is that something you were just, you just want for your life, right?
Yeah, it's something I've evolved to. I certainly wanted to perform I certainly wanted to get back onto the land, and I certainly wanted to be the person moving the cows. And I've had to go through basically this 4 years. I mean, it's, for me, it's the equivalent of a self-funded PhD program, so I've had to be on the ground in multiple environments doing this to be able to have that high level understanding. But now that I, to some degree, have mastered what I'm doing on the ground, it's time for me to step away from the day-to-day moving of the cows and apply my knowledge in a broader way that can be more scalable. So yeah, if I can get to the point where I just have to make one good decision a day, that's fantastic. And I think we're on the way.
Hmm. And so, what would you recommend? Like, I've thought about homesteading at some point. Like, what would you recommend to somebody that's just getting started? Like, where, other than, of course, following you and getting information from you, um, what would be like step one, I suppose?
I think step one in any endeavor is taking a serious look at your assets. And that's not just the amount of money you have, the amount of stuff you own. It's about your relationships with people. It's about the things of your life that are around that will allow you so, to succeed. I mean, when I was in Oregon, I used every relationship that I had. I borrowed this from this person. I used this. I asked this person for help. I was constantly using every resource available to me to make something happen. So, well, I would recommend, number one, yeah, taking a good look at your assets and the resources around you. Number two, I would recommend reading a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, because no matter what you're doing, your ability to relate to other humans is going to completely determine your outcome, because every endeavor is a human endeavor. And number three, my own personal take on it is that we live in a virtual reality simulation that is completely influenceable by the player. And those happen in the form of miracles. Like, if you set your intention on something and you start taking action towards it, even if it looks like it's not going to happen, it will generally happen for you. And so you might consider that a form of obsession. So the reason things have worked out for me, knock on wood, that they continue, is that I've been obsessed with it. I've been sort of single pointed focused on it, and I've given up all expectation of where the result will come from. So, it's like when I made that video, I was like, I'm going to make a ranch in Uruguay happen. That's it. And, I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And you just have to trust that. And I don't know. I've talked to probably every realtor in Uruguay. I've talked to ranchers. I've talked to individuals. That's the amount of resources that come out of the woodwork when you declare your intention to the universe will shock you. And the biggest problem is that people think the world that we live in is real, and it's not. It's a complete illusion, and
It's a video.
yeah, it's right. And the if you think you're real and if you think you're alive, um, fundamentally with no other angle to it, then you'll be stuck in this material existence where you have to see every step in front of you to know how you're going to get to someplace. But if you want to homestead, if you want to get back to the land, yeah, read books, but just take action. There is every hand in a game of poker is a winning hand if you play it right. You can make anything happen in this world if the opportunity is there. It's just up to you to play the cards right. And that's why I say take a stock of all your assets. Everything you need to create the life that you want is available around you. You just have to see it and then start taking action, and then things will happen out of the blue. That's why in literature they have a phrase called Deus ex machina, which is God out of the machine. And that's what that means, is that your reality, the way you intend it, will be honored by the inner workings of the universe by handing you what you need somehow out of the blue. Just by if you work forward forthrightly to what you want to create, you will the tools you need to accomplish that will be given to you.
Yeah, I think that's a sentiment that I hear again and again. Like, if you have faith, if you lead your life with conviction, you move in the direction that you want. It all sort of comes together, and it sounds a bit, like, I don't know, hocus pocus or whatever. But I've talked to a lot of people, and it's a recurring thought from people that are leading the sort of life that you lead, that we lead. So
Yeah.
it's yeah.
it takes a lot of humility to have that thought, right? Because you have to know that the universe or reality or the video game knows all of the combinations. It knows all of the ways it can give you what you want, but we don't know. We know almost none of them, and to think that it's extremely arrogant to think that you have to know the path forward to get what you want. The best that you can do is decide what you want and take the best action that you can towards getting it. And then you have to have a profound amount of humility and faith that everything that's not you, as if that's a thing, by the way, everything outside of you is conspiring in some universal consciousness to put what you need in front of you to make that thing happen. And then here's the key. When you get that thing, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. You've gained nothing. There's no benefit. You just have that thing. You're no better off. You're no worse off. You're still just a projection into this hologram of reality that's going to die and fade away back to the source at some point. And that's one of the keys to quote unquote manifesting, in my opinion, is that you have to give up attachment on having it. Once you get it, it doesn't matter. It's just the thing that you have now.
A lot of people, I mean, in my opinion, the first step would be to figure out what it is you want, right? But I have an ongoing theory that people know what they want deep down, right? They're just too afraid to well, first admit it and then manifest it, right, Matt? You can't manifest it if you can't even admit it to yourself. So just sitting down and thinking, right? Like, what is it that you want? And not letting externalities affect that, I think, is what holds most people back.
Right. I think so. I think you're exactly right. There is the idea that, you're always attracting what you want. It's just that there are these layers that we've calcified that are blocking it from coming to us. And I think that that's one of the most important. And another thing that I really highly value is a meditation practice. I've been a practicing Zen Buddhist since 2015, and if you want to break out of the illusion of reality and come to know, as they call in Zen Buddhism, your original face before your parents were born. That's a meditation practice is really extremely important because you can sort of, over time, you can cultivate an awareness of what's actually going on in here and out here. And I think that's a very practical and helpful thing towards learning what it is that we actually want. I mean, I didn't realize for a long time that the reason that I played guitar and tried to get famous as a guitar player was because I thought that was the only, and this was what I call a transparent belief. This is a belief that I had that I didn't know that I had, and it was running my operating system. The only reason that I wanted to get famous as a guitar player was because I believed that was the only way that I would make enough money to get a ranch. So ultimately, deep down, I wanted to get a ranch, and I thought in some perverted way that being a guitar player would be, instead of just beginning to ranch. And then once I just put myself on the ranching path, then voila, it started happening. And it was once I realized that, and that's the funny thing about those, transparent beliefs is, maybe another way to say what you were talking about, those things that are sitting on top of what we want deep down, that are blocking us from getting it. And once you see a transparent belief, the hardest part is seeing it. And then once you see it, then it disappears. It dissipates. And that's one of the benefits of having a meditation practice.
I think, there's obviously a lot of different religions in the world, but they all sort of lean towards a lot of the same message. But I haven't seen any that clearly delineated as much as Buddhism. I mean, I'm not personally a Buddhist, but it's definitely one that puts it much more explicitly. And I think a lot of the other common religions in the West, I guess, like that, those ideas that are in Buddhism, they've been lost over the years. They were originally there, maybe, but then there's been some, dilution or movement or loss of message, I suppose, lost in translation.
Sure. I mean, one of the things that my teacher, a guy named Henry Schuckman, says, which is right. He said, I would have been a Christian mystic if I had, if I had read that at the right time. It's, it's, it's just, i- i- Christians, the Sufis, the Muslims, they all have this. It's all, there's all the thread of this is in there, and this is, Jesus and the Buddha could have had a pretty wicked conversation, probably. So um, I think it's all there, and and it's interesting. And uh, one of the great tragedies is a degradation of sophistication and interpretation of our religions over time, and then we begin to get these just very, very superficial interpretations um, that lose all of the magic in a way.
Definitely, definitely. Well, I guess one of my last questions here is if somebody wants to purchase meat from you, where would they need to go?
Fireandsalt.com.
Awesome, awesome. And one thing I noticed um you sell by, by the quarter, by the eighth, by the hat, or by the whole maybe. And I was curious why that is.
Well, it's because it's a lot easier to handle in shipping. It's
Mhm.
a much bigger pain in the butt. And one of the well, it's ease in shipping basically. We have to we take the animal to the butcher, and if it's pre-sold already, then we get it from the butcher, we put it in a box, and we ship it to you. But if we're selling just bits and pieces, just a steak, just a roast, we have to take the animal from the butcher, bring it back to our place, store it, and then ship it out piecemeal. So we can have all of this done in one, um, effectively in one run.
Interesting. Okay. And I suppose that selling piecemeal would also have a smaller margin for you, or would it be a
It
lot?
would actually have a larger margin, but once you
Mm,
factor in labor and shipping costs, it and just
mhm.
the cost of the amount of time that it'll take you, it's kind of a wash.
I see. I see. Awesome. Well, like you said, fireandsalt.com, right? So, and
Absolutely.
your socials, if you wanted to share them, I can put them in the description as usual. But
Sure, that'd be great.
yeah,
So, Fire and Salt on TikTok and Fire and Salt Beef on Instagram. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, my least favorite social media. Just my name, Hobbs Megaray.
awesome, awesome. Yeah, I was wondering how you pronounce that. Alrighty, well, thanks so much for joining me, and yeah, maybe we can do this again in the future. But good luck very much with your endeavors in Uruguay, and definitely so good to
I
have you.
appreciate it. Thanks, Andres. I appreciate the invitation. I look forward to speaking to you again.
Awesome.